So today we're going to be here with Marc Elliott de Lama, founder and owner of Fluent Finance Abroad. We're going to be talking about mortgages on the Costa del Sol and very specific mortgages in rural areas. So Marc Elliott, welcome.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for the invite.
Let's talk a little bit about what it is you do, what you can do for the clients, and what your specialism is, etc.
Okay, so I'm the owner and founder of Fluent Finance Abroad. I set it up in 2006. And we are very limited in scope, but we are basically a Spanish mortgage broker. We're regulated with the Bank of Spain. That means we can act anywhere in the whole country, and we are not limited as to which banks we can talk to. So we have access to the whole of market. So our goal really is to give good quality regulated advice and give maximum choice to all our clients.
And does that also mean, for example, because you can work in the whole of Spain, your license, it also means that not everybody can become a mortgage advisor?
Yeah, a real proper mortgage advisor who can actually call themselves whole of market independent has to be registered with the Bank of Spain. Unfortunately, the regulation doesn't go far enough. Some banks will work and pay commissions to maybe lawyers or real estate agents, but they're not regulated and they're not whole of market. So you need to be a little bit careful.
Okay, because I've always understood that even for me as a real estate agent, it's almost illegal to give advice on mortgages because I'm not trained, I'm not studied, I'm not certified. So it's very important for people to speak with specialists like you.
I would definitely say so. In other countries, I'm from the UK and I know you're from the Netherlands, mortgage advice is very heavily regulated.
Yeah.
The regulation in Spain, unfortunately, isn't at that level. And so you do need to be careful. Should always choose someone that's registered with the Bank of Spain, like we are.
Okay, well, let's dive into it. Let's dive a little bit into the world of mortgages and in the initial phase, especially about rural mortgages, because it's a thing. A lot of people are afraid of here. A lot of people are, well, not up to speed with everything, the regulations or what it is. How are your experiences regarding rural mortgages and the do's and don'ts? Okay,
that's a really great question. It's one that it's the first time I've ever been asked that. Now, rustic or rural properties, campo properties, fincas or cortijos, as they're sometimes called, you can finance them. The main issue is obviously where they are built. They're built in land. They're built on rustic or rural land.
Yeah.
And so therefore that land is classed differently than urban. Urban land is land that has gone through planning and has been given permissions and it's urbanizable. The main issues that we have and banks have is that it's the classification of the land and how the property has been built. Mortgages are available for them. I personally love doing mortgages on rustic fincas, but you do need to be specialists. You do have to have a good understanding of what the limitations are. Some of the limitations is that when was the property built, how was the property built, and how many meters of the property is actually registered as a home. And those are the things that we would analyze very early on to ensure that we wouldn't have any problems with a rustic finca.
And is it then, because what you'll see a lot of times as well in rural areas, that they build more than they should have, does that hugely inflate the possibilities for mortgages?
For sure, yeah, because there's a lot of things going on here. And one of the biggest things is a bank will send a valuer, a surveyor, Bank of Spain registered property valuer, to assess the legalities. They will do their due diligence on the property. And their role is to highlight any discrepancies from the reality to what's actually the legal reality, to highlight those discrepancies to the lender so that if they're, the reason why they do that, there's many reasons. Obviously it affects the value and resale value, but for rural properties, I think this is really important, is that it affects insurance. So let me give you an example. If you had a beautiful finca which has been built 500 square meters, you think this is amazing, it's a beautiful cortijo, it's worth 1.5 million, let's say. But let's say only 200 meters is actually officially registered. If that property burnt down,
you only got the insurance.
The insurance will only cover you for 200 square meters. This is where the key is. So this is why property due diligence done by us and legals is so important initially before we start getting too excited about mortgaging a rustic property.
And do you then, for example, also see that the mortgage conditions on rustic land is going to be different than on urban land, or?
Luckily, no.
Okay.
What you may find is that the pool of lenders you can go to may be smaller, because not every bank will want to have the criteria to lend on rural properties. But the loan to value may be smaller, because they may deem it a slightly higher risk in terms of repossession or resale value. It's easier to sell a property in Fuengirola at 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom than it is to sell a rustic finca in Sevilla or something like that, right? So the loan to values may be smaller, but rates will be exactly the same.
Is there something in this whole area that buyers need to be very aware of if buying and mortgaging properties on the inland that are not urban?
I can only answer as what I would do if I was interested in it. So the first thing I would do is I would actually pay for an independent survey from a Bank of Spain registered surveyor. They will tell me if it's mortgageable, number one, how the property is registered, and if I'm going to have any issues once I get the mortgage approved. That would be the first thing I'd do, and that's what we do when a client is interested in that. So that's the first thing. What would the bank actually be valuing?
Yeah.
And what value would that be? And that would be the first recommendation that I would say.
And will you do this before a client decides to buy, to get a better understanding? So before you make an offer, you try to get in a surveyor to get a better understanding of what are your possibilities with the bank before you put in the offer?
100%. Before you buy anything, you've got to know what you're buying, right? It makes sense. Any asset or anything, if you're buying a stock, you've got to do your research on the stock. It's the same with the property. Don't invest money on a property unless you know exactly what you're buying, and having a proper survey done is what you should do.
And now we're coming maybe to a little bit of tricky part. How often does this really happen? Just not only with your clients, but I know of a lot of stories of people buying inland and having paid purchase price deposits and everything, and only to find out we're getting a problem, or what they've told me isn't what's matched up. How are your experience in this mortgage-wise?
It happens all the time, unfortunately. There's, for some strange reasons, people don't do their due diligence properly, or they trust what's been told. And sometimes we can help, but sometimes we can't. And
one of the recent stories that we had with one of the properties was that we were selling, and a complete lack probably of knowledge from the buying party that was in this. Their lawyer told them that they couldn't mortgage or buy the property because it didn't have a licencia primera ocupación.
Mm-hmm.
According to her, it made the property illegal, and they would never get a mortgage on it.
Okay.
How do you guys see this? Can you mortgage a property without an LPO?
We don't know until we've done due diligence on the property, but you would assume that if a property was built in 1976, LPOs weren't being granted back then, but what you can get is something called an AFO, which is an AFO, which is a certificate of no infracción urbanística, right? So that's a certificate from the town hall saying that there aren't any charges against the property, but we would never ask a lawyer to do that. We would always ask a professional surveyor to do that, because that's their job and that's their responsibility. So yes, I don't know the particular circumstances, but we would probably go at it a slightly different way.
Yeah. So in the end, yes, even properties without an LPO, you can still get a mortgage, and it's perfectly. If the survey comes out fine, everything is okay.
If someone built a property on rustic land 2 years ago, or and it doesn't have an LPO, then we have a problem. Yeah. But if it's built in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, historically, they can't just go down there and knock it down.
No.
Right?
And do you see, for example, that the whole process of getting the mortgage is very much different with rural properties than, let's say, you buy the villa in Seville instead of the apartment in Fuengirola? Is there much difference in the process, or how it goes, or how long it takes?
No, it's exactly the same. We approach a rustic finca in exactly the same way as we would do any other. We would get a desktop valuation done on the finca, initially, because the first thing I need to know is, are we going to have a problem with obtaining a mortgage or the valuation? I don't want to go 2 months down the line and then realise, oh, I've got a problem with the... So the first thing we would do, and we would do that with any property, whether it be rustic or not. So the whole process is exactly the same. Buying the house in Spain is exactly the same. It's just how you go about it.
Yeah.
And luckily we've done lots of Finca Rustica, so we have a nice process for that.
Is there anything so far that you want to talk more about, the rustic part of mortgages, things that I've missed?
Not really.
Any very important information that the people should know?
The only thing I would say is that it is specialist.
Yeah.
You do need to work with a company that has been there, done it before. Many years ago, when I first started, I hated doing rustics because I just didn't know how to do them. I didn't know which valuation companies to work with. I didn't know when was the right time to do the valuation. It's all basically down to the valuation.
Yeah.
But now, you do need a specialist mortgage expert to help you do this, because it's not straightforward. It can be fraught with problems.
And do you see then, for example, that to evaluate a rustic property, that you need to have different valuators than for the normal ones?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, one valuer. There's so many different factors. So if we're valuing a property in Malaga City, we would obviously look to instruct a valuer that has knowledge of Malaga City, but we wouldn't probably use the same valuer to go and value a finca in Alarin, for example, because they're not that experienced.
It's a different world.
Again, it's a trial and error, and experience will tell you got to go this way in order to be successful.
Yeah. So this is the funny thing, like the Costa del Sol it's not a very big area, but it's very diverse, and with everything you're gonna need a specific set of specialists. Yeah. So even within the mortgage world, you've got your different specialists that you need for everything.
I'd just like to say that I've been doing mortgages for 2 decades in Spain. So as a firm, we've done thousands. Rustic properties really excite me. I've done lots of mortgages on 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartments in Marbella, Fingarola, and anywhere else. I really get excited when I get a lovely Finca Rustica. So yeah,
a little bit more complex story.
Yeah. I love it.
Challenge. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Martin. Appreciate it.
Yeah.